Good morning, Gamecock fans. Welcome in to episode 16 of Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Today's February 3rd, 2025. So happy February, happy end of January to all of you out there. Uh, they say January goes by slow. I don't think it did for yours truly this year, but I could see where it would. All of a sudden, I think January, you sort of just get things taken away. No more football, no more college football. Other college football drug this year a little bit. I still don't know whether that's a real thing or whether we're just all not used to it and we'll get used to it at some point and be like, oh, okay. NFL playoffs, I think, kind of were a dud. I think most of the country was pulling for the Bills and the Lions to make it and ended up with the Eagles and Chiefs yet again. Still should be a heck of a Super Bowl party next Sunday, right? If you're going, that's awesome. And we'd love to hear from you on the show about your Super Bowl party setup. Inside the Gamecocks at gmail.com is the best way to get that to us. Unless you're a club chief member, you can join on YouTube and get in the Nana Sports chat box for the show and the morning show. Our chat box is open for our other live shows, by the way, including JC and Morgan. Of course, this is not live, but inside the Gamecocks at gmail.com. Tell us about what you're planning for the Super Bowl, if anything. If anything. I know some people that were doing dry January and they liked it. Football season got a little out of control and they may not be doing anything but sitting on the couch with their significant other and catching the game and doing a honeydew list. Maybe that's me. I don't know. Of course, Carolina basketball this weekend. Oh man, just another game where they take a ranked team, went toe to toe, lost 0-9, folks. 0-9 the first half of the SEC season. Not much more to say about that. I know they're going to get into it with JB and Whittle on the morning show, and Mike, I believe, is in today as well. And we'll talk about it a little bit with Phil, too, on the show later today. It's just, again, learning how to win. And this team does not appear to know that yet. Oh, gosh, yeah, this is about the fifth game, fourth at home. Man, just a couple of buckets, a few less mistakes. This team's at 15-7 and 5-4, and probably, just about with a decent second half, even a losing record in the second half of the SEC, would be in the NCAA tournament for the second straight year. That's how small of a margin of error it is in this league. We've known that for a while in football, and we certainly know it in baseball now, which I think is going to be the bloodbath of all bloodbaths. With Texas and Oklahoma coming in. And then I think it smacked everybody in the face in men's basketball this year. Everybody. I mean, my goodness. Vanderbilt gets ranked. They go down by 30 to Oklahoma, who didn't start well. It's just one of those things. But Gamecocks drop another one. Also, shout out Asia Wilson. Jersey retirement yesterday was a nice celebration. She's one of the most iconic athletes in South Carolina history. And certainly well deserved. And being a local product, sort of, that could have gone anywhere in the country, came to South Carolina, was part of the first national championship under Dawn Staley and in program history. There's a statue of her outside the arena. Always will be remembered as a local player that has achieved and, as Dawn Staley said, accomplished all her dreams. And you got to like somebody like that. So anyway, not going to talk about basketball all day today. Wanted to get it out of the way first, though. And get into some football because this is a football-focused coffee. Those of you that love Carolina football, I'll talk about Carolina football just about every single day. Different personnel, angles, recruiting, whatever, And of course, you can get that right here on YouTube. Please hit the subscribe button, or also on our podcast stream, Inside the Gamecocks. It's available on Apple Pods, Google Play, wherever you get podcast. We run it through the 24/7 Sports main system. And so go rate us 5 stars or no stars. If you write a bad comment on our podcast, I hate you. I'm just kidding. There's some really good constructive criticism on there. But anyway, I've babbled enough. All right, so what I want to talk about today is one of my favorite subjects, pass rush. I love the SEC, obviously. Used to cover national recruiting. D-line was my best position as far as guys I could find. And I just kind of evaluate that well. I played when I was little, or not little, when I was in elementary school, I played D tackle because I was bigger than everybody. They played DN most of the time after that, and tight end on offense. But love defensive line, love the coaching of it, love the athletes. They're these big dudes that can run, and it's just wow. There's a big wow factor when it comes to great defensive linemen, and they kind of come in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes, you don't really want the 6'1", 255-pound guy. Ideally, you don't want to recruit a bunch of those guys. I saw it happen at Auburn about 10 years ago. They two top 5 guys, but they didn't hit the specs. And, one of them, Byron Cowart, still in the NFL. I think he got picked up by the Bears at some point this past year. But they ranked him number 1. He's never number 1 in the country. And that's just a rule of thumb. You want guys that look like power forwards or small forwards out there. But you do have the 6'1", 6'2" guy that sometimes, man, it's really good. I mean, here, South Carolina's had Eric Norwood. Melvin Ingram was about only 6'2" or something, 285, but certainly was one of the most talented, instinctive football players to play not only at South Carolina, but I think in the SEC. So there's been some good ones. South Carolina had a good defensive line this past year, especially defensive end. I think 17, 18 sacks combined with Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart. Now, Dylan Stewart's back, so we all know that. That's where you start. But the question is, going into spring practice throughout the winter, who is going to replace Dylan Stewart? Monday's starting off swimmingly. Who is going to replace Kyle Kennard? A lot of talk about Kyle Kennard. From the Senior Bowl, Todd McShay, go check that out. He was pretty impressed. The draft guru, no longer with ESPN, but Todd's one of my favorite guys. I used to kind of semi-work with him because recruiting with Tom Luganbill and Billy Tucker and Craig Halbert and those guys, that was in the same department with McShay at ESPN. Really good people there. But he was talking him up. So we'll see where he gets drafted. Mike and Jamie were talking about it last week on the morning show, and ESPN had him ranked below Jordan Birch, and that kind of stuck in the craw of some Gamecock fans. I don't know that that'll be the case, but we'll see what happens with Kyle Kennard moving forward. Certainly, I think helped himself, at least according to the buzz. But you got to replace him, and he opted out of the bowl, and so the first guy I'm going to talk about is a guy that replaced him in the bowl. And that's veteran Brian Thomas Jr. He's one of those guys that doesn't fit the specs physically. He's about 6'2", 6'2 and a half, 245, 250. Has been a good pass rusher during his career at South Carolina in certain situations. Has probably overplayed what the expectations were coming in because he came in around 220, looked like a linebacker. Was an evaluation by, I believe, Clayton White. Down out of the Orlando area. His dad played in the NFL. Certainly was a good player. And he's gotten better and better and better. And when you're looking at, like, is he going to, who starts the bowl? Thomas was the number 2 guy. So obviously, I think it made sense to start him. I thought he played pretty well against Illinois. He had a sack. Down to down. Was he Kyle Kennard? Probably not. Not a lot of people are. But he played well. I would think, and I say this a lot, in terms of depth chart, projected depth chart, all that, somebody's got to go out there first when they start spring practice. And coaches determine that in a lot of different ways. That doesn't normally hold, but I would believe that Thomas and Stewart would be the first 2 out at spring practice just because, it's kind of like the continuation of a streaming series on Netflix. When we last left you, Brian Thomas was playing and was the starter at DN. So we're going to start up that way. But we all know the plot line of those things change pretty quickly sometimes. And I if you ask me, I think, there's some real possibilities here among the 5 players I'm going to mention, Thomas being the first, of that happening. I think South Carolina's recruited pretty well at this position. I think they continue to. I think also you have to keep in mind when you're talking about pass rush that D tackles do rush the passer. When I look at Xavier Hardy, Monkel Goodwine, I think those guys are certainly capable of getting back there. And then Clayton White likes to send his linebackers. Didn't do it as much this year, did it a lot in 2023. And you look and you see Justin Runquo. God, why? I wrote it out phonetically. I've been saying it right. He's a guy that can rush the passer. I think Fred Johnson too. Jerron Willis, I believe, is similar to Bam Martin Scott, Bam Martin Scott was probably their best linebacker pass rusher last year. They did send him quite a bit. Uh, Whereas in 2023, they were sending Debo, they were sending everybody because they just did not have much at edge. And I want to back up real quick and talk about 2023 really fast. And I've mentioned this before on various shows and writing. I think one of the things we missed, all of us, because with that team, you talk about injuries and personnel. And so the offense, when you have Spencer Rattler, that's going to get a lot of focus. And you look and you're like, well, you had the Juice Wells injury and that torpedoed wide receiver because you really didn't have anybody besides Xavier Legette. When Legette and Wells, you put Legette on one side, Wells on the other, that's a whole different ball game when you consider the tight ends you have and all that. You consider running back because at the end, I think Mario Anderson was probably 70%. Juju was out. There was nobody. Basically, nobody back there. And then, of course, the offensive line was a revolving door with a dozen players hurt and they couldn't protect, and there were true freshmen everywhere. So everybody focused on the offense. Defensively, one of the things I think, because about mid-season, the secondary was wonky, bad, getting lit up. They had to fix it. Florida, Mississippi State, all those teams, Texas A&M even, when they finally went to the three-man front, went downfield in the second quarter and pulled away. So there was all this talk about the secondary. Well, I think one of the reasons for the breakdown is think about this, and this is nothing against Thomas Jr. in 2023, or Tyreek Johnson out there, or Jordan Strawn, who unfortunately was just not himself after the knee injury the year before. And then who else behind them? JT Gear was hurt. He was supposed to come in and start. Don't get me started on Drew Tuazama. That's still the worst. That is high comedy if you ever read my Drew Tuazama thoughts on the big spur after he committed. That may be the most horribly wrong, terrible thing I've ever written. You win some, you lose some, but sometimes you lose by about 70 and it stinks. But nah, it's not. It's more funny than anything. But he did absolutely nothing at South Carolina. So edge DN was an issue. There's a reason Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard started all year. And what happens with that is not just like when you're talking about pass rush, which South Carolina had to blitz and struggled to do. When they went to the three-man front, Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley got in some. Tyree Johnson played his butt off, but just, limited guy in his 6th year. You just didn't have pass rush to disrupt anything. And of course, that snowballs on your secondary and things like that. And then on top of that, you can't set the edge in the run game at all. It's hard. So it was a night and day jump at DN. We didn't talk about it a lot. Carolina went from bad, and it was bad. Looking back on it, I should have talked about it more. But it was not. Everybody talks about SEC level. I kind of cringe when people say that because I'm like, well, there's good actual individual players everywhere. SEC level is, probably a broad term, but it wasn't SEC level. It wasn't even close. It wasn't ACC level. And so that was a tough year for Sterling Lucas. And just like a lot of times around here, the mantra is never again. They said, no, we're going to go get a bunch of running backs. We're going to get some ends. We're going to get, I think they're still recruiting like it's, they're about to eat their last meal on the offensive line. Oh, offensive line, come on, never again. And that's kind of part of, I think, the head coach Shane Beamer learning, not learning lessons. That sounds like he didn't know, but going through it and going, we're not, I'm demanding that this does not happen again. We get enough players in here. So yeah, so end was or edge was one of those restock positions and turned out well. Gamecocks had a fearsome duo of ends last year. So I mentioned Thomas Jr. He started in the bowl game after Kennard opted out. Like I said, I think he'll walk out there first. But there's four other guys to keep an eye on, and keep in mind here too. South Carolina, I don't know that we noticed it a lot, but they did rotate six ends most games. And so they lose Kennard and then they lose Gilbert Edmond, who came back and was a role player when healthy for the Gamecocks. Had some good moments when he came back, but you saw how much the room improved simply because he was a starter in 2022, goes to FSU, comes back, and not a starter, but played. Gilbert probably feels like he made the right decision. And like I said, did some good things, but he's gone too. So you're kind of looking for your six. I've mentioned Dylan Stewart, so that's one. I mentioned Brian Thomas Jr., that's two. So these other guys, there are returners, and then there's a newcomer, and we'll see what happens. The first one I will mention is another returner, Desmond Umazulu. Now, South Carolina won a big recruiting battle for him against Ohio State. He's out of Maryland. When he came out of high school, Brian Doan, who I respect a lot, who goes and watches these guys play up there, and then you watch the film, they had him inside at tackle with his school because he was so big. Kind of moved out to end, got better as a senior, but and he's played. He's gotten in the rotation the last couple of years, but he does have a ways to go as of the end of the season. Still, and some guys take a little while to develop on the line of scrimmage. The potential is still there, but if he wants to start, which when South Carolina recruited him and signed him in the class of 2023, I think the thought was eventually he would be a starter. There needs to be some improvement this off season, just in terms of going to battle, getting stronger, continuing to get stronger and working hard. I don't think that there's any sort of hard and fast rule on defensive linemen. I mean, look at Kyle Kennard. I mean, save the best for last. I remember, Kevin Dodd, whose cousin's coming to South Carolina up at Clemson. It was 3 years, and then all of a sudden he's a draft pick. So this type of thing does happen, but I think you would hope that by next year, after playing 112 snaps last season, which Desmond did, he's ready to go battle for that starting job opposite Dylan Stewart. So that's one. And I think I still have hope for him, but I certainly understand some folks that have maybe watched him and say, well, what's the big deal? Because he hasn't had that flash play in a game, all that good stuff. So there's Desmond. And hopefully he ends up taking a jump because the Gamecocks need him. I mentioned JT Gear. He actually started the Old Dominion game. Sterling Lucas said, or Clayton White, because it was very consistent. I don't think they wanted to start Dylan Stewart because he's a true freshman right away. Obviously, Dylan came in, and the rest is history. JT last season, I think, was getting healthy, had some nagging stuff injury wise. Flashed in the Oklahoma game. I think he got better and better as the year went on. And with him, it's a matter of health. When he was at Syracuse in 2022, and he's a South Carolina native, he's from Belton Honeypath, and Syracuse got him and sort of developed him, and the Gamecocks got him out of the portal. By the end of his final season at Syracuse, he was playing at a really high level. I mean, everybody in the program, including myself, when they got him out of the portal, I think they got him late, thought he'd step in and start. And then he had a foot injury in preseason. Where have you heard the foot injury before? And got back, but couldn't really play on it, and it was just a mess. But he had a much more even season. I think he only had 80, slightly less snaps than Desmond because he of health. So stay healthy. That's the key for JT. Keep getting stronger and bigger. And I think once he gets to that health, kind of like Case and Henry. And look, let's not have a Case and Henry debate right now. I'm just using this as an example of someone that's had some injuries over time, over several seasons, and then all of a sudden plays through a season, is healthy, and he's fine. I think JT is kind of that type of guy because when healthy, he's obviously done some things in college football at Syracuse. He's done some things for Carolina. He's number 12, by the way, for those that who's JT Gear. He's number 12. I don't know if he'll wear that number this year because these guys changed numbers, right? But I think he is a legit option out there. He's a big kid, I think 6'5", 250, 260, something like that. And I think, by the way, Desmond was 6'6", 258 when he measured in this past year. But I love South Carolina defensive linemen. Can't go wrong there. And certainly JT is one of them, the only one I'm talking about here. But look out for him. Older player. I think that could be one where he could either start opposite Stewart, but remember they want to rotate, so he could be one that's behind Stewart on the other side. And I've got some more thoughts about Dylan here in a second that I've mentioned before, but they're worth mentioning again. So there's that. Then there's the transfer portal pickup, Jaylen Brown. Obviously, he was at Missouri last season. He had played against the Gamecocks in that thrilling Mayor's Cup game, actually tackled Lenore Sellers. Missouri was pretty deep and old at end last year, so didn't play a ton, but he was a true freshman. He was a top 100 prospect. I mean, yeah, inside the top 100 out of the state of Alabama per 24/7 Sports. So 6'6", 260 kind of guy. He is a player that if you sit here and say, well, and you believe in the doctrine that most players, most, not all, make their biggest jump between year one and year two, he's good enough to start, right? He's good enough to be that guy. Is he going to be dominant like Kyle Kennard? No, but nobody is. Let's just put it out there. If they get half the production that Kyle Kennard got this past season from the opposite end position, then great. The idea is Dylan Stewart Stewart will take Kennard's place production wise, and then you need another guy to kind of take Stewart's place. But I can't rule him out. I mean, Missouri did not want him to leave. They thought he was a guy that had future star written all over him. The coach at Missouri that was his position coach actually put that on X. We didn't want him to leave. He made a family decision. Great. South Carolina was in the mix for him out of high school, and I think just wanted to come to South Carolina. There wasn't this huge NIL pirating there. Missouri was paying him probably around whatever South Carolina has for him NIL-wise. But this guy has a long runway because he redshirted last year, so he'll be a redshirt freshman this season, and very, very high upside. So if not this year, the next, I expect him to at least be in the rotation, though, because like I said, and look, they rolled 6 in and out last year because kind of had a bunch of older guys. I don't know necessarily that'll happen, but 4, if you can rotate 4, great, because it keeps those guys fresh for the fourth quarter. Same thing, same concept as D tackle. And really everywhere on defense, it's good to be able to sub guys in and out, so they're not out there playing every single snap and wearing down, because offenses are designed to wear down your defense. That's why it's important to get off the field. That kind of thing. It's hard to play defense. It's very exhausting, especially rushing the passer. So Jaylen Brown, keep an eye on him from the state of Alabama. And now I'm going to throw a wild card at you. He's a player that was a highly touted recruit out of Georgia as a linebacker. Everybody was happy when Carolina got him. They beat Tennessee, Auburn, Florida, you name it, out of Walton and Marietta. Carolina's gotten players from there before. And I think Walton. Yeah, Walton. Wendell Gregory. Now, almost quietly, right now, I wrote about him on thebigspur.com last week. Almost quietly, one day we all wake up and he's at edge. Hale McGranahan noticed it at practice. And then, of course, on the official site, GamecocksOnline.com, which Steve Fink does a great job, wealth of information on there. If you just want the granular stats and bios and stuff, check that out. 6'4", 250. I think there are two things. Number one, he was getting too big to play linebacker. But you say Fred Johnson's big. Yeah, but Fred Johnson's a little bit more of a natural linebacker. What Wendell Gregory was in high school, whereas you looked at Fred Johnson's like linebacker all the way. And then like you looked at Donovan Darden, 2025 class, and maybe said end all the way until you saw him play linebacker. And they're like, oh, I see the genius behind this. So that's that. But with Gregory, a lot of stuff close to the line of scrimmage, a lot of off the edge standing up, a lot of stuff like that. I didn't see a lot of like purely playing in space, doing the things traditional linebackers did. Not to say he couldn't do it, because obviously they had him in camp, they evaluated him or whatever. But the coaching staff made a determination: your future's with your hand in the dirt, and that's where he's playing. And I'll tell you, when you watch what he did do well in high school, it was rush the passer, violent hands. We talk about hand violence with defensive linemen. That means quick hands and being physical. The quickness to get off the edge, foot wise, feet wise. There's great length there, long arms, big frame. Listed at 6'4", like I said, 6'4", 250 last year. Can he get to 260? This is a guy that maybe people have forgotten about. There were people asking, could he move back to linebacker when it looked like they're going to be short at linebacker this year? The answer is no. This is kind of my wild card. I would project he will be in the rotation, and he could compete for a starting job. They also could, because he's young and in his second year. And again, your improvement is made between first and second year. Maybe he's behind Stewart and gets his snaps. I don't know. So we'll see sort of what happens with him. But Wendell Gregory certainly is another option. And like I said earlier, when you talk about pass rush, especially in Clayton White's scheme, he can get pass rush out of his linebackers. The D tackles obviously have to pass rush. This isn't a D tackle focused episode of Coffee. We're all about the edge here. But I think South Carolina's got potential with this group. You sort of look at it. Anthony Addison is a true freshman out of Sumter that I believe is going to play edge to start with. He's another guy probably needs to gain some weight, things like that. But I think this room is in good shape. Is it quite? Do you look at it and go, "Well, it's super deep like last year"? Probably not. But and I think they'll trot Thomas out, and it'll be Thomas's job until it isn't. So it's up to one of these other guys, be it Gregory, Umazulu, Gear, who I like. I like all three of them to make it happen. Or Brown. Sorry, did not mean to not mention Brown. Now I'll say this too: they kind of were flirting around with TJ Searcy, who they were probably never going to get, because he was from Florida and I think ended up at A&M out of the portal. That's a guy that I thought during high school, a lot of lip service to South Carolina. Never really got the sense that was one of his top schools, like top 2 or 3. It was probably top 5. Always kind of knew he would go someplace else. And in the portal, I didn't feel any different. And lo and behold, he didn't even visit. But a bigger type, older end that has a lot of experience. It was on the shopping list, but not necessarily. It was like, if you can get the right one, great. But if not, it's fine. And these guys too, obviously I mentioned pass rush. They got to set the edge in the run game as well. So who's going to do that? That's not been a strength of Thomas Jr.'s at all. He got better this year, actually played on goal line or red zone or the inside the 10 defense. I don't know what they call it. Got better. And he actually publicly mentioned that he needed to get better. And Sterling Lucas told him that. But can these guys play the run? I think Brown, just in what little I've gathered on him, is suited to do it. Don't know about Umazulu, Gear maybe, Gregory maybe. So you got to play the run too. I mean, it's called setting the edge. And we talked about 2023 earlier. Carolina could not set the edge, and then didn't tackle well in the secondary. So teams would, it's so night and day this year on defense when teams would try to go wide on the Gamecocks. That didn't work. Carolina a lot of times just shut that completely down. And that's a fast defense, and that's a strong defense up front. And South Carolina can have that. Now, Dylan Stewart, let's talk about him for briefly because we're wrapping up here on Coffee. on a Monday morning. Thanks for listening. Dylan Stewart, I don't know if this will happen. This is J.C. Shurburtt saying, like, gut feeling, maybe, pie in the sky. It's not, I'm not reporting anything I've heard. I'd maybe move him around. Now, you have to be careful with this. And maybe he doesn't, maybe they don't. But he got, when you have Kennard over there, it's like, well, just go ahead and let everybody triple team Dylan. and that's fine, because Kennard and everybody else is going to come off the head, and that works. And I'm not saying all these five guys I just mentioned won't be really good, and you can do the same thing. But this has been done before. Clowney, when Brad Lawing was the D-line coach here, they would move Clowney around. I think once Lawing left, they moved him around in 2013. Probably didn't use him the best way. I still remember Steve Spurrier getting all in Deke Adams' butt because they dropped Clowney in the pass coverage. Like, he's not here to drop into pass coverage. Yet another thing that was just brilliant about that period of time of Gamecock football. But they would move Clowney and line him up on different sides and things like that to kind of not trick, but you don't know where he's going to line up and coming, and that puts kind of pressure on the offensive line rather than just lining up and saying, well, these three guys got 6 and we're going to try to block him, and it's 1-on-3. And of course he was held the whole time. I mean, which got to be ridiculous in my opinion. I mean, what's the thought process there? Oh, he's just too good, so somebody's got to hold him, and so we're not going to call it. Absolutely insane. So, yeah, so to maybe get him more in space, and unlike Jadeveon, who was hand in the dirt just about the whole time in high school, what he did with the Texans was different, but I never thought that was his strength. In high school, Dylan played in space. He would line up at linebacker, he'd line up over the center, they'd move him around, and he's good at playing in space. He's a different type of athlete than Clowney is. With his bend and his get off and all that good stuff. So it's just something that kind of came in my mind. Maybe that they would look for it. And it has less to do with like the other ends and more to do with how can you unleash Dylan Stewart and all of his talent better. And it may be that because he's going to command a lot of attention. He's going to get double and triple teamed. He's going to get held every play. Harder to do that when you're on offense and you get into your cadence and he's moving to the other side and shifting. We see defenses do that from time to time. All right, be sure to check out Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show coming up here in a couple hours with Jamie Bradford. Again, I believe Mike Morgan's on today. It's hard to tell with his travel schedule. Also, John Whittle on all things, getting you ready for Carolina baseball, which opening day is a week from Friday. They're going to rename the field, all that good stuff. I don't know what to make of this team. They're not ranked, but I don't think that means much. From talking to Whittle and some other folks, they kind of expect, they think they have a chance to get in the mix. It's going to be a bloodbath, but this is a proud program and certainly one that most years is competitive nationally. So we'll see with a really good first-year head coach in Paul Maneri. So we'll see what happens. All right, this has been Coffee. Thanks for listening. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right here on YouTube. J.C. Shurburtt signing off. Check me on the show later. We'll holla at you soon, Gamecock fans.